Hello, Matt, and welcome to Devs on the Shed. My name is Paul Kukiel, and I'm an enterprise solution architect here at AWS. My background has spent many years in development, and I have a number of interesting hobbies, and a lot of those revolve around building some hands-on activities, some IoT projects. But a lot of my background has been spent in development, and I really enjoy software as a whole. Recently, in the past few years, I've shifted across to an application architect style role, and that's a little bit about me. And joining me, host Matt Coles. So, give us a little bit of intro about yourself, Matt.
Yeah, hey Paul, and hey everyone. So my name's Matthew Coles. I am at AWS with Paul as well, but we're on slightly different teams. I'm a principal technical account manager, basically day-to-day helping customers operationalize their workloads, scale them up, all those good things. Traditionally, though, I did come from a development background, so similar to Paul, which is why we get along and why we got together. I have a lot of toys. I just to put it plain and simple and out there, I like to tinker with a lot of stuff. In my spare time, I do a lot of programming. Harkening back to my development days, I love playing with hardware. IT and Raspberry Pis really fascinate me. And then, I just like to do a whole bunch of stuff that people would probably generally rate as a little bit nerdy. But that's kind of why we wanted to start the show, I guess. We like to get hands-on with the tools. We spend a lot of time tinkering, which is why we're in our workshops. But Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit about the intent behind Devs in the Shed, maybe?
Yeah, so look, Matt and I work with, as we said, a number of different customers, and we have a good insight into the industry as a whole. And by spending a lot of time in the development life cycle, we realized that the reality of going ahead and building software and building applications means, we're Googling a lot. We're looking up the docs, we're reading through the docs, there's a lot of trial and error. And, some of what we wanted to do as part of Devs in the Shed was to reground some of what we do day to day. When we get up on stage and do a presentation, we've obviously rehearsed that a long time, but as a day-to-day dev, getting into the console, getting into the code, getting dirty means a lot of mistakes. You're bumbling around, you're trying to figure out what is happening bit by bit. And so that's one segment of the show that we want to show, new features, new releases, how we actually go ahead and work through code and try and solve those problems. And the second part is that because, as Matt said, we like, doing things with electronics and connecting wires, and that might not be just electronics, but it could be, mechatronics as well. But that requires a lot of trial and error, a lot of practice, and the first go at what you do often can be maybe wrong, and you need to restart and do that again. And when you're coming out to the final solution, there's a lot of precision involved in that. And so I do have a bunch of Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, wires. You can see sort of behind you there, a whole big stacks of drawers of diodes and resistors and so forth to build things. And we thought that we might bring some of that into some hands-on show and tells with what we're doing. And we're also hoping to involve the community, because we'd love to hear what the community is doing and what the community is building. And we've already got a number of guest speakers lined up to come and talk about some of the interesting projects that they've got going on there.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, maybe, I think the intent, from my side, I really like, I read the documentation, I read the release notes, I see what the product does, and it's a little bit different to actually using that practically, right? So there's always that step. It's there's a blog sometimes that explains how to do things quite simply. And I had fun with my Arduino this year. No, Arduinos are great. I've actually got one in that box in the background there. So maybe we'll play with that later in the year. But going back to what I was saying, there's the blog, the release notes on how something works. There's the technical documentation. Sometimes there's a little bit of a tutorial on how to use things. But as a developer, as developers, all of us know that it's a learning process. We've actually got to get hands on and explore how something works. And so that's kind of really the other reason why I quite liked the idea of coming together and sharing how we kind of work over Twitch. And one thing that Paul always makes fun of me about is sometimes I'm a little bit dyslexic. So I say code as infrastructure instead of infrastructure as code, right? Like I just dyslexically say things. So we thought maybe what would be fun to explore is something on the code as infrastructure side or infrastructure as code side.
There you go.
Let's have a look at something new. I know, right? It naturally happens. Let's look at something new that's come out. And I think CDK version 2 is in developer preview at the moment, if I remember correctly. And CDKv2 it's probably got a couple of changes. I haven't exactly had a look at it just yet, but that could be maybe something fun to kick around with this particular first episode. And I think Paul was talking about it before we got together. He's got an existing app that's running CDKv1. So let's all maybe take a look and see what we can do with CDKv2. I'll get my screen sharing happening. Maybe we'll go through the blog first. But whilst I'm doing that, Paul, did you have anything to add?
One thing that I will say is that both Matt and I are in Melbourne, and we are actually in our sheds. And Melbourne is the city of like multiple seasons in one day. And for our very first show, we luckily got some rain. So if you hear something that sounds like a mechanical keyboard in the background, that's actually rain on the tin shed. So you'll just have to bear through us with that. And I can see, I sort of look to the left here, the door looks like it might be blowing open. If I have to get up and quickly close that, I'll go ahead and do that as well. But yeah, Matt, I'll your screen.
Yeah, that's cool. I've got it up. So I've just got the blog post, the original article about CDKv2 coming out. It's also got Go CDK as something that was announced in the same article. So let's all have a read of this together. I might make it a little bit bigger for everyone so it fits on the screen nicely. So version 2 is a developer preview. That means don't use it for what you're building in production just yet. But if you want to play with it and see how it works, which is what we're going to do today, definitely feel free to go ahead and install it. Now, for those that aren't too familiar with CDK or Cloud Development Kit, it's effectively an abstraction is probably the way that I'd think of it, on top of like CloudFormation or Terraform. Like ultimately, it's going to generate CloudFormation code that's going to allow you to generate a whole bunch of AWS resources, under the hood when you're using it. But it allows you to simply say, and I love this as a developer, you can simply say, I want a virtual private network, I want this EC2 server, I want this database, and I don't want to have to get really finite into the detail of how this is all going to be structured, but I'm going to just very quickly define it in like 12 lines of code or something. And then I run commands using the CDK CLI that effectively allows me to output what could be hundreds of lines of CloudFormation. And then that will be sent to AWS and I'll go ahead and build all those resources for me. Is there anything to kind of add in your definition of CDK, Paul? I know you've spent a bit more time with it than me. Yeah,
I think that's a pretty good summary. And, for those of us who have been building on, AWS for a while, we start in the very early days, we're comfortable with clicking through and navigating through the console. Obviously, that's not repeatable. In comes CloudFormation that defines like a specific state that we want our environment to look like. But, working with templates is, you tend to do a lot of copy and paste. It's very verbose. It often doesn't provide, sensible defaults out of the box, whereas CDK does provide those. But CDK is also becomes really comfortable for developers because you can use proper programming. So you can write loops, you can do conditionals with what you're doing. You can set variables and move those that around. And it's available in like most of the popular languages. And I think even Go is coming up pretty soon as well. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good intro to that, Matt.
Yeah, but, what is it like? I know in particular, I've looked at TypeScript and Python for CDK. But if I remember correctly, there's Java, there's going to be Go now. There's quite a few languages that it is supported by default. Anyways, what's different with CDK2? So let's have a look. So CDK version 2 consolidates the construct library. So we'll have a look at that in a second maybe and talk about what construct library is into a single package known as AWS CDK lib. eliminates the need to download individual packages for each AWS service used. So that's pretty cool. I think I always go back to my app development past, but usually I like to not have all the particular elements of a package installed in my mobile app because it increases the download size. CDK, because it's all infrastructure based, it probably actually works better with this particular change that we've got, where you install CDK and everything's available for you to basically call, so you can build any type of infrastructure that you want. Did you have anything to add there?
I think anybody that's watching along will probably resonate with. I'm sure they've experienced what has happened where you've been building out your stack within CDK. You need a new dependency. You go ahead and install that, and between yesterday and today, a new version has been rolled out, and that version is not backwards compatible. So you have a dependency mismatch. And that's probably been one of the pain points that is looked to seriously address in CDK version 2. So we have this one package that we pull in, and we can separate that out, how we want to in our code. But really, it's to greatly assist avoiding that dependency management between a dependency version mismatch between the specific constructs that we go ahead and import. And as you said, Matt, because we are building something locally, that this is never going to affect end users in download speed or performance or the size of the package or something. It's not going to affect our end users at all. So it actually makes the experience as a developer interacting with CDK much simpler, much easier. Nice.
Okay, so yeah, that's very cool. Let's see. So one of the other things is stable APIs. So in addition, CDK version 2 only includes the stable APIs. So if I remember back to version 1 of CDK, there was experimental APIs like the Amplify one. And so I'm guessing that it means that the experimental ones are removed from the core package, and you'll have to add them in if you want to until they move to a stable release.
Yeah, that's right. As well as any non-supported APIs. So anything that's considered legacy has been removed from CDKv2. So that we might find a breakage here or there around if you were using some sort of outdated API around that. So those are pretty much the main things that we should be looking for. And if there's, I think you've got it up there. There's a blog post that talks about how to go ahead and migrate through, and that's what we'll try and work through with the sample application. The end result from the team has been as, I guess, to provide as minimal work for us as developers to migrate our app from CDKv1 to v2. And so, it'll be interesting to see how that actually pans out when we go ahead and try and do that.
Yeah. One thing that I'm thinking of, we'll have a look through the migration steps, and I'll pull the app link that you gave me beforehand. I've got it up here in the background. But I'm interested, out of everyone in the audience, who's used CDK before? Have people used CloudFormation, Terraform, CDK? Do you have a particular go-to? And have you used version 1? I'm just wanting to make sure what we're going to cover is going to be handy for a few people, hopefully. So while you're writing
Simon is starting. Yeah, Simon is starting to get involved with CDK.
Okay, cool.
He's probably had we've got Terraform and some SDK.
Yep.
And Rich develops. Long live Sam. So for those that are not aware, Sam is our serverless application model. I really like Sam too. It's still one of my go-tos when I'm building out example apps and demonstration apps. Especially if you're it's a serverless application model, right? So it's specifically designed around rapidly getting your serverless application built and an abstraction on top of CloudFormation as well. So I really like that as well.
Yeah, Sam's quite cool. Yeah. If I remember around the end of last month as well, didn't we release better support for Sam within CDK? And so the idea is, I haven't explored that yet, but that's quite a cool option that I'll have to have a look at sometime.
Yeah, it's something that we might explore in a later show.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this repository that you've given me, Paul. So I'll just copy this link here.
Yep.
And I've got VS Code in the background, and I've just got a bunch of projects that I've pulled down. So what I might do is I'll just do a git clone, and I might have you talk about this this project once it's pulled down.
Sure.
There we go. and I might CD into it as well.
So maybe just open that overview PNG file, Matt, and that will give a little bit of an overview of what is happening in this little application.
Yep. Okay.
So the idea of this little CDK stack is we've got a fictitious customer, and that customer is building out a software as a service solution. As they start to onboard their customers, each one of those customers wants a subdomain of the primary domain to host and run their application on. The application is provided by like example domain. So example domain is a company that is providing the SaaS solution, and they want the same code base available to every one of their customers. But every one of those customers wants a custom domain. So they want a custom domain to be able to load the same code base. That code base is a single page application. So it's HTML and JavaScript. They're a customer that is cloud native. So they don't have servers. They don't want to have like a specific setup with a whole bunch of reverse proxies. And they are cost conscious with what they're doing. So they said, we want to do this as serverlessly as possible, as cost conscious as possible, and in a way that doesn't, pollute our AWS environment with like many entries. So if you could imagine, if you had 1,000 customers, do you need to have 1,000 records in Route 53? Do you need to have 1,000 Cloudfront distributions? Do you need to have 1,000 buckets? And with that would also come, 1,000 signed certificates. This stack uses a wildcard domain entry in Route 53 attached to a single Cloudfront distribution that's attached to a single Cloudfront bucket. There's origin access identity put in place so that it allows only CloudFormation to interact with that S3 bucket. And ACM is there to provide that wildcard SSL certificate that CloudFront uses to be able to authorize any domain or any subdomain at exampledomain.com. And so this stack will go ahead and provision all of this infrastructure, and with it provision like a small little app that exists in that S3 bucket. And if we do get it going today, that will be live. So we've actually got like a real URL that we should be able to play with and try that out and see how that goes. What the benefit for this for a customer would be, and as we know, like invalidating a CloudFront distribution can become costly if you're invalidating a lot of assets. And if you have to do that every time you're releasing a new version of your application for 1,000 different, 1,000 or more, like, this solution is infinitely scalable, CloudFront distributions, that invalidation process can become costly. This means that you only have to invalidate that one CloudFront distribution, and all of your customers will then retrieve like the most up-to-date assets. So
that's cool. I was just thinking, while we look through this, if people have a Route 53 domain that they've got set up in their accounts, they could technically follow along with us as well. So you can do a git clone, and Paul, maybe in the chat, it's worth posting that repo as well, just in case there are anyone that wants to follow along. Call out if you do, but let's get the link in there. Because we haven't started just yet as well, so you can follow along with us as well if you've got that Route 53 domain already in a particular account. And then all that I've done after the git clone is a CD into the folder.
Yeah, it does require an existing domain.
Yep.
Within your account, so a domain delegated to your account. So it does do a specific lookup on that. So Matt, on your computer, do you have a CDK version 1 installed at the moment?
Yeah, let me check. I'll just clear up the terminal so it's a little bit fresh. Let us go, is it version? I always get these things wrong because we have way too many CLIs that we work with across different systems. Okay, so it's CDK -- version. I might do a clear and then bring that up the top. So we're running version 1.106.1. So you'll need to install CDKv1 if you are following these steps, and you can get that just from the CDK getting started page in AWS. If I remember correctly off the top of my head, it's something like Npm Install AWS CDK /G for global, so it installs into your global node modules folder. I'm pretty sure that's the commands, but you'll find it on the getting started page for CDK. Maybe a link in the chat could help with that as well. But we are going to move this to V2. I do think let's get this running with V1 first, right? So as this is like a CDK project, I'm guessing you've put everything in your wildcard static app -stack.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a fairly simple app, so the whole lot is in there.
Okay. Yep. Now I'm getting a whole bunch of package errors. That is because I need to do an npm install. So I'll let that run in the background. Just type that into my terminal, and this will just pull down CDK for this local project, as well as all the other assets that are defined within my package.json. So you can see here, pretty much this app, nothing else is being used for but CDK. So those things are going to get pulled down from online. We're using TypeScript as well, not JavaScript for this. So you can see a couple of packages relate to that, but it's fairly light package.json. So hopefully it doesn't take too long. Now, walk us through what's happening in this script maybe to get started, Paul.
Okay, so if we start at the top of this script here, and I'll have to sort of look at it mine because your screen is quite small now.
I'll increase the size for everyone. There we go.
Okay, sure. Yep. So this specific stack expects a parameter to be passed in, and that is the primary domain. And so one of the steps is it does do a specific lookup inside your account to grab the Route 53 hosted zone for the domain that you've posted in. So if we sort of look at line 22 there, you can see that step is happening there. But just so that's one specific item there, and the example domain.com, like that is there so you can bootstrap your application if you don't particularly pass one in. But if we scroll to the top, we'll have a quick look at some of the dependencies that we're importing and looking through. So as part of this, we create an S3 bucket. We do a bucket deployment, so we are going to go ahead and deploy some code into that bucket. That requires a couple of these little constructs, such as the bucket deployment and the source there. We're going to import the whole Cloudfront construct there, and we're going to use that. And from ACM, we're going to use that. So ACM is the Amazon Certificate Manager. So we are going to want to go ahead and create a certificate for this domain. This is really nice in CDK because, as we know, when you want to create a certificate in ACM, you have to go ahead and make specific DNS entries. You have to validate that or use email to validate that you are the owner of that domain. CDK does this for us, so it does that as a custom resource. And if you were to go ahead and deploy this stack, you would see that it does provision a Lambda function that handles all of that for you. So another great reason for CDK, like we're creating SSL certificates in 3-4 lines of code, which would normally take a couple of minutes of either clicking through the console or to set that all up within CloudFormation, and then go ahead and build some sort of like custom resource to go ahead and do that for you. We're going to make use of Route 53, so we're going to go ahead and add entries into Route 53, so that wildcard DNS entry, which is effectively star.mydomain.com. And then we're going to, for the target, we're going to use like a specific target that says, for that new DNS entry, where are we going to point that to? And that will be CloudFront there as well. So if the document itself is reasonably well commented. And so we can, if we scroll through and maybe we jump to line 31, we can see what's going on there. So we're going to create a new source bucket, and the index document for that source bucket will be index.html. The bucket name will be, we're going to hard code prefix that bucket with the domain that you're going to ahead and pass in. So we don't need to edit code or change code anywhere here to be able to go ahead and do that. You could set that up as some sort of random ID if you wanted to deploy this multiple times, but because we're going to deploy it just once for this example, this is just fine. So we also set up an origin access identity. So this is what we want to do to make sure that there is no access to the bucket other than via CloudFront. We want to restrict all incoming access to that bucket to the identity of CloudFront itself. There's a bucket deployment there. So we're going to take the source from a specific folder there. And if you have a look at that folder, it's saying the source is source.asset website source path. And if we were to look up and down that website source path, it actually comes from app. So there's a tiny little application that lives within app there. That's one HTML file that we're going to put in there with some embedded JavaScript in the page. It's just for demonstration purposes. At line 48, we can see that what we are doing here is using Route 53 to do a zone lookup. So we're going to pass in that actual DNS entry. So example, domain.com. That will go to Route 53, look that up, and pull down the identity that the ID of the zone that we're going to go ahead and use later. So here's where I spoke briefly about the certificate and the creation of the certificate. This here, and as I mentioned, like in 4 lines of code, we can create and validate certificates and have them available. For this example, because we are going to use CloudFront, you'll see further up or within the bin of the application, I've hard-coded this region to the Virginia region where we need the certificates to reside for access to CloudFront. And then on 51, we create that CloudFront distribution. And I think in here is one of those older APIs that are being used. So this will work and deploy in CDK1, but will need a slight customization for CDK version 2. So this is where I think we're going to probably find the most trouble around this section of code here. But this creates a new CloudFront distribution. It sets the origin to that S3 bucket. It applies that origin access identity to that. And then attaches that certificate to that CloudFront distribution. The final step is that we're going to create that new Route 53. So on line 80 there, Matt. The final step here is we're going to create that new A record and add that to Route 53. So we're going to use the zone that we looked up earlier, so it knows that zone ID. The record name will be the subdomain that we're passing in, so that's the star that's defined earlier. And the target is that Route 53 record target from alias. So that is going to go ahead and find the new CloudFront distribution that we created, so the C name for the CloudFront distribution, and apply that to that Route 53 DNS entry there. So, verbosely commented, I would say, and 86 lines of code to deploy this application. If we were to delete out and tighten that up, you can see that a lot can happen here with just a little bit of CDK.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing that I need to change, right? Like you've got a domain you mentioned before we started the call. What was the domain name that I need to change line 22 to? So the account that we've got
is randomsite.site.
Randomsite.site. So if anyone is following along, let us know in the chat that you'd put in the domain name that you've got in your AWS accounts Route 53 section if you've brought one.
Yep. And so just to reiterate that you can go ahead and run this application and pass in a command line parameter. This just will, if you want to go ahead and test it, the example domain just allows you to bootstrap the app. So if you do CDK Deploy, you can pass in a command line parameter with -c, and you can pass in that domain, it will work. So there is no need to adjust the code at all. It'll work perfectly fine. But it's just a little bit easier for this example to go ahead and hard code that in.
Excellent. Now, to get started, I guess I'm going to have to do a CDK Bootstrap, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the Bootstrap doing in the background? I know it takes a little bit to think.
So that's setting up all the resources in the background that enables this stack to be deployed into the environment. So there are a couple of...
Yeah, there's this folder that just got generated. I saw that pop up, cdk.out.
Yep. So yeah, there's it generates basically a connection between our local stack and what is happening in the cloud.
Excellent. And so that's been created. The next command, if I remember correctly, is just simply a CDK deploy, right? That should get things
Yeah,
ticking.
that's right. Yep.
So we are going to go through we're going to go through that migration guide in a second, but I just want to see it working with V1 firstly. Okay, yep. So this is the list of the resources that are going to get created. So everything that Paul's talked about beforehand, that's all going to kick into gear here. Got some resource change, IAM policy changes as well. I'm just going to say yes to all of this because I want all of this built. Now it's going to take a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, while that's kicking off, for those that are unaware, you can run CDK synth and you can look at what is going to happen or change within your environment. And CDK deploy will go through your code and effectively in the background convert that to CloudFormation and go ahead and deploy that into your environment. I'm just going to close that door, Matt.
Yeah, that's okay. Might just try the synth commands in another terminal. No cookies. Yeah, because you can actually open up the CloudFormation that has generated, and you can see like maybe thousands of lines for this particular application of CloudFormation that's generated. So even though we're 80 lines, probably half of that's comments, or maybe 25% comments. Looking at it, the CloudFormation that does get generated in the hundreds of lines if I was to dive into it.
I think we got a really good comment. Yes, we are literally in the shed, Jesse.
So yeah, we are.
And that was interesting for today, because it is, in our practice runs, in our experimentation and setting up the lights and making sure we had, the correct speeds on Ethernet and so forth. It was nice, still calm days. And today we happened to be, this morning was extremely noisy with the rain and windy as well. But yes, we are in the sheds, and I know, like, I previously had my shed wired up for Ethernet, but Matt has an extra long cable running through his yard until he gets an electrician to come in and go ahead. How can I? Yeah,
that's right. I've got a cabin.
I'll pan around the shed. Look.
Yeah, you show it off. I was going to say, I'm getting a nice cabin built in about 8 weeks, and so I might move in there. It'll be a little bit warmer, but it's going to have all my cool stuff in it. But today, yeah, it's literally pouring down. You can probably hear a little bit of the rain in the background, so apologies for that. We're in Melbourne, and I'm near the Dandenong, so it's always pouring with rain in the area that I'm in during winter. But I've run Ethernet from my router in the middle of the lounge. I've run that through the kitchen. The wife isn't at home at the moment, but it goes right throughout the property, around the side of the house. It's like 30 meters worth of Ethernet, and I've got that plugged into this machine. So this is a little bit behind the scenes, and then I've got power running from my house as well. So I've got a side panel that's weatherproofed in outdoors, and I've got a weatherproofed cable running into the sheds. And it's nice and warm in here. I'm quite lucky, but it is literally pouring outside.
And that's what we wanted to do. So the first, obviously Matt and I are going to have to, we're becoming familiar with the platform and how to go ahead and run the streams. But over time, we want to actually do a little bit more hands-on. So we'll be looking to set up some of the cameras so that we can actually go ahead and do some specific soldering, connect some pieces up together, and do some experimentation with like IoT and green grass, and look to get our Lambda functions to turn off some lights on and off, and all sorts of different things. And for those that might know me, there's a couple of interesting side projects that I myself have on the side. And so we'd like to be able to bring those in bit by bit as well, and hear from the feedback that the community is going ahead, because there's so many people building interesting things that are not just like within the web browser, like, so not just sitting in front of your computer, but are actually like physical devices that we're putting together, and have an interest in those areas as well. But yes, Jesse, you're right. We wouldn't be able to stream if there was no clouds. So
I would be interested in any IoT projects that anyone's doing on the chat. I did talk to a couple of people the other day, and they were basically using machine learning webcams, looking at grapevines to see when things were ready to be harvested in terms of grapes. But they were also looking at like the quality of the leaves that are coming off the grapevine, and they also had like little kind of readers that they put into the soil to test to make sure that the soil was perfect planting for grapes. But that was one of the cool. That's one of the cool IoT projects I heard about recently. A call out to the Raspberry Pi group in Melbourne. They're building a weather balloon, which is quite exciting as well. So they're building all of that off of Raspberry Pis and a bunch of other stuff. So that's pretty cool as well. But yeah, call out on the chat if you've got any cool IoT projects. I did half start
Jesse's
as well.
got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jesse's got one, Matt. His home cake system and his smoker. So I know, because I did smoke some meat, earlier in the year with my friends, and it just takes an extremely long time to do that. It is hard work to determine whether the temperature is right. You're opening and closing it, and the moment you open it and have a look at what and put the thermometer in, you realize that you've lost a whole bunch of temperature out of your smoker. So that's a really interesting one to come up with. And I know that process can take 12 hours to smoke a large brisket or something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love a good brisket. I'll have to invest in the gear sometime soon. But my sister's husband, he has the works, and so we always used to go to his for a feast. The other thing I was going to say is I've got in the very background, I've got a homemade some found Deep Racer that I've half built as well. So that's something that I'll hopefully get started in the coming weeks and put together. Other cool ones that I actually heard as well recently was somebody had a Raspberry Pi and a weight system, and they were weighing the amount of honey that was being produced by bees in their farm. And so they were kind of working out when was the right time to harvest the honey from the hive. And so that was a cool Raspberry Pi project. I know somebody else had a farm, and they were basically tagging all the cows and recognizing them by the patterns and spots on the cows. And they were kind of watching the movements of the cows across the multiple fields that they've got across the property to see if they could pick up any behavioral changes or habits in the cows. And that wasn't really for scientific purposes. It was more like curiosity, right, at their farm, I believe. So, yeah, there's a ton of really cool IoT stuff. Has anything else come through on the chat there in terms of people's personal projects, Paul?
No, I think Jesse's the only one that's been doing something, that's commented about doing something interesting. I know earlier Simon mentioned the that little device that came out. Let me scroll up. I can't remember what it's called. That little device, the EduKit, the IoT EduKit. So I know he's been experimenting with that. I have that as well. I think that would be interesting to go through. It's a little device that we can send real-time messages to. It sits and runs by itself. You can plug sensors into it. You can have a little display on the screen and do some data collection with that. And it's reasonably simple to use. So it's quite a fun little, I guess, like, it's a toy, but you can do some real things with it. But it's quite fun, quite interesting to use. So maybe one day we can go ahead and look at that.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Yeah, while we can see that this stack is going ahead and deploying that, like the time taken here is making sure that certificate is validating itself in the background. And so if I was to look in the console now, I'd be able to see specific things are being created, so we can see that this is happening. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just really quickly see if I can share my screen with that and show that. So let me try and alter that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess when we've taken a look at that, if it's still going, we might have a look at
starting to convert it.
Migrating. Yeah, we won't touch the code just yet. Yeah, I just realized 40 minutes has gone very fast.
Yeah. So if this is the hosted zone of random site, we can see that there has been, like, it is working. We can see what's happening here. So this is the CNAME. So this CNAME is being written in by that Lambda function that is going ahead and setting up that certificate. So we should see that certificate is probably in a state where at the moment, let's have a look in here. I'm in the wrong region, North Virginia. So US East 1 is where we're provisioning that certificate. And we should be able to see, so that certificate has been issued. So I don't know what the CDK is doing at the moment, but it's sitting there waiting. So we can see that CDK has gone ahead and generated the certificate, and here's that CNAME that we're looking for. So it was, if we were to go ahead and do this manually, we'd have to create the CNAME, or we'd click the button that if it was delegated to Route 53, and that would set that up. If we were to look at S3, we would be able to see that bucket there. That should exist. So wildcard random site, so that bucket has been created. The file has been deployed into that. If we went to Cloudfront, you can see a Cloudfront distribution there. So we do. And we can see that if we have a look at that, so the alternate domain name has been set to what we passed in. The SSL certificate has taken that SSL certificate that we created in ACM. The origin and group here is set to that specific bucket. And the bucket has been restricted access, and it's using a specific identity at the moment. So that identity has been applied to that bucket. So if we were to look at the bucket permissions, we would see that. I'm guessing now it's probably only...
Looks like it's only 2 steps away. It's definitely moved from 13 to 14. So we've got 2 steps left. It did take a while for that step 13. But we might be just around the corner. What I might do is,
I think it's probably done. So we can see now the final entry has been added into DNS. Now
15.
this can take a couple of minutes to propagate.
Here we go.
DNS.
Yep.
Yeah. So if we go back, I'll reshare your screen, and you should be able to open. Actually, do you have a browser open, Matt? If you open a browser and go to like map.randomsite.
.site, if I remember correctly.
So there we go. So
yep.
Yeah. So this is what we expected to have happened. So anything .randomsite.site will bring up, we'll host that application. And this is just a tiny little bit of JavaScript that is looking up that host name and alerting it and injecting that back into the web page so you can see that it's actually going ahead and working. So if you were to change that, it would work. One of the questions that was asked when I first demonstrated this to a specific customer is that going to catch every single DNS entry that comes through? And the answer to that is no. So this is sits at the bottom of the list. So if you had something like api.myrandomsite.com, if you had that explicitly defined in Route 53, the API will resolve to wherever you point the API to. If you had www or staging or something like that, that will all take precedence. But if it doesn't match any one of those entries within DNS, then it will fall back into this. So that this is a way that you can go ahead and say customer1.randomsite.site would work. So we can see that the stack worked. It's gone ahead and deployed that. And I guess now we're probably at the point where we might want to try and install CDK version 2.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was thinking.
This week, this is a series, so we'll come back and we'll pick up next week where we're at, and we'll look to, we have an interesting backlog of things that we want to talk about, but we'd really love to hear back from the community of what all of you that are viewing today would like to see us, step through, because some of these new features can be complicated, and we sort of, sometimes we understand that you need to bumble your way through those, and we wanted to get really hands-on and try some of those.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we literally have 50 things, so call out what you'd like, because we're going to start to try and work out what the priorities are each show. And then, of course, AWS is going to surprise us sometimes, right? We'll wake up one morning, the day before the show, and then suddenly there's this really cool thing that's just appeared out of nothing. So we'll have to play with that stuff as well. Okay, so migrating, it should be fairly simple. We talked about the changes beforehand at the very start, but it's now one large library. You don't have to have multiple little packages. What are the prerequisites? Okay, here we go. So a new version of the CDK toolkit is required for use of CDKv2. Typescript 3.8 is required as well, and I think I already meet that prerequisite. So basically, to install CDK2, I need to run this command by the looks of things. So it's going to be the first thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to npm install -g AWS-CDK @next. Now, I could remove the @next and just pull down the latest, but that's just going to put me to 1.0, right? So @next is really important if you want to define going to the developer preview, the 2.0. You can go to a particular dot release as well. So you could go 2.0.6 or something which is what we're up to now in the CDK documentation. So you can stick to a particular version of 2.0 if you want to as well, just by putting that on the end. But we're going to do this command. I'm going to go back to my editor, and I'm going to run this. And once that's done, I am going to double check that the CLI is recognized that we're now using 2.0. Here we go. We've got npm errors. So let's just sudo that. Close your eyes, everyone. Here we go. So we've installed that package. Now let's double check that we have moved to version 2. Yep. So you saw beforehand I was using 1.0.1.6 or something. Now I'm running 2.0.0-rc release candidate.6. So I'm using the most up-to-date CDK. That hasn't touched anything in my app, right? So I'm guessing the next thing in the migration guide that we're going to need to do, I'll update the JSON later, actually. But then I'm really particular. I like to do my dependencies next. So I'm just going to scroll down And these are the new dependencies. So I'll just copy the dependencies that's mentioned for TypeScript. You can see we've got different language examples as well, which is always awesome. So if you're using Java, you can follow the dependencies for Java for importing. For example, I'm going to go to my package.json file. Go ahead.
This is a good call out. So as soon as we open the package.json, we see all the individual dependencies that we've gone ahead and installed. And now we've really simplified that.
Yeah, that's right. So CDK-lib, theoretically, that's going to make up like all of these actually, really,
yep.
right, in reality. So I can basically take these three and I can paste over all the AWS-CDK ones that I've referred to before. I can delete the dependencies that it was pasted in. Actually, just before I do that, so the libraries were at AWS-CDK beforehand. Now it's AWS-CDK-lib. So it's a subtle difference, which means that I'm going to have to change the imports in the wildcard static app-stack file. Now there's some dev dependencies as well. I don't think these matter too much, right? I think if I look at what we've got here, it's just basically replacing AWS CDK, and then it's ensuring that I use TypeScript, which I already have. So I'll just copy paste that across. That should be fine. So I've saved the file, package.json, just Command or Control S. And what I probably want to do now is do an npm install again. I could start fresh if I wanted to with node modules. Sometimes I do that if I encounter issues, but I'm just going to try with npm install to pull down those packages that I've changed.
Okay, that's good. Green. No
green.
Vulnerabilities and no errors. That's always a good start.
Clear the console to make it a little bit more readable. And then the next thing, I think I'll just scroll back up and I'll have a look at what it was telling me in the cdk.json. So remove all feature flags from cdk.json. You can add one or more free flags. So they've cut a whole bunch of flags there. And you can have those set to true or false. These are the free flags that you use in that file now. And the context should look like this. But the context could be blank, right, if I'm not using any of these. So let's just copy this over.
Check. I don't think this application is
check.
Yeah.
So RDS, no. API gateway, no, not on above. Core, that's new. No, it's different. Enable this stack. So that probably means I can ignore the context. So I don't need any of those flags set.
Yep.
And the existing K1 stuff, I can just go on. See you later. And just format that nicely. Here we go. So I'll save that.
So far we've deleted code.
Yeah, exactly. It's less code is always a good thing, right? Okay, so that's saved. And what else do we need to do? Yeah, that's right. So the TypeScript file, we're going to change the way that the imports work. So we're going to import from -lib now, as I mentioned beforehand. So let's have a look at this file. Going up the top, I can see that there's dependency areas. I'm guessing AWS core is probably just the root library now, isn't it, Paul?
So let
me double check the documentation.
Yep.
So how do I replace that core?
So I don't think we need that core require anymore.
So we can just clear it then. Okay.
So we can just do import star as CDK from AWS CDK-lib. Yeah, just like
bring it up to that.
So Matt, on the other page, there was a little, the way the constructs were imported was AWS underscore something or other. So like there's a good example there for AWS S3 as S3. So if we take that very, very first line, so just copy and paste that first line. Yeah, so line 11 is what we'll look at. And we'll compare that to what we're doing on line 2. So those are the differences.
Yeah, so let me think this through in my head. So this should probably be, this will be importing from core again, right?
Yep.
But it will be like imports.
So we want to import. I think what we want to do here is we want AWS S3, but we wanted to avoid changing our code as much as possible. So somewhere in the code, we're probably referencing bucket as a construct. So we want AWS underscore S3 as bucket, and that should do what we want.
So if we go import all of AWS S3, right? And
if we do that as bucket and alias it, then we don't need to change any of our code. Otherwise, we'd have to go ahead and change our code there.
Okay, so I can just write it like that then.
Yep. So that should mean that further on in the code, we don't need to change that around. That'll keep it as simple as possible and as least changes as possible to our code.
Yep. Okay. And then we've got to do the same for the bucket deployment, don't we?
Yeah. So maybe we'd have to look at the docs and see what bucket deployment is. It's probably AWS underscore bucket deployment, but maybe just flip to the docs and have a quick look at that. So maybe search for deployment there, maybe they changed the name.
Yeah, let me change the search.
There is
deployment.
Right. Yeah.
So it has changed a little bit. And then the construct is bucket deployment.
So
okay. So we probably need...
Yeah, we'll need to import that.
So what do we want to do here? We want to do dash lib, and then do we want to go like that and then go bucket deployment? We're probably going to drag the source out, right? Because the source is probably different too.
The source will be different for that as well.
Yep. So, yep.
That should work for that bit.
Will we have to do anything different for source here, or will that work?
That should work. That should work.
Okay.
That is saying we want bucket deployment, and because that all comes out of S3 deployment, so that looks correct there.
Yep. Cool.
So let's have a look
at Cloudfront.
Probably again, that's probably AWS underscore Cloudfront. That looks like it is. So I'm sort of backwards and forwards to the docs as well.
Okay.
And what if we
get that just underscore right? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe if we alias that as well.
And that needs to be changed to lib. Let's call this. We'll import all as Cloudfront. Do we want to alias it?
No, that'd be fine. Just like that. That should work.
And then ACM. Let's have a look. Where is that? ACM PCA.
Certificate.
It's certificate manager. Is it down the bottom?
Yeah. So maybe like in some of their constructs, they've gone a little more verbose, a little more descriptive.
Yep. It's going to be this.
So a question for the audience: has anybody in the audience tried to migrate an app from V1 to V2 yet? And have you run into any issues there? Or? I mean, it's only sort of been released a few weeks ago, and we're all busy with our day jobs, so we probably haven't really touched it that much. But there are some good features, and I think especially in personal projects, avoiding the dependency mismatch is something that I probably, in my own personal projects and demonstrations, might start using CDKv2.
I'm just in the background replacing all the other imports. So those have kind of lined up. I can take the @ symbol out of this as well. So let me just remove that. I don't need the alias. There we go.
It looks like we've imported everything. It might be worth like scrolling through the app and seeing whether there's any squeals for errors.
So new bucket. So what we probably want is expression is not constructible. It's a new bucket. So why is that not picking up? Import S3 as bucket.
I say because we imported all of S3, not the specific bucket bit. There.
So maybe what we do is we go as S3.
Yep.
And then if we go to here, we can go like S3.bucket.
Yeah, I think that's
yeah. There we go.
Yep.
Okay, and bucket deployment. Let's just double check and see if we've got that reference down below. What am I doing? Bucket, and then let's search for bucket deployment. That seems to be okay because it's importing from, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that should have been across 2 different lines. Yeah, so we could have had
so
AWS S3 source probably would have been the way to do that if we had a we would have done, I think source might not work there.
Well, I can kind of change it to this as well, right? So I can go S3 deployment as S3 deploy. And then I can use that S3 deploy against bucket deployment, I'm pretty sure, right? And source.
Yep.
So I could go like that.
Yep.
And then let's just double check that's not anywhere else. And then source is the other one that we want. So let me have a look. I want S3 deploy.
I'll just give you a 2-minute warning, Matt. So we're getting close. We might have to definitely pick it up next week. We won't cheat. We won't go any further.
Yeah, we can always pause it for the next week. That's completely fine. So source.assets. And I think that's okay. And I can basically clear this line then, right? Because I'm just pointing at those with S3 deploy. And to fix that up, I'll just reference the lib folder because I'm just pulling this particular project. And I might do the same for all these actually. So I'll just go Cloudfront as Cloudfront.
Just we just had a comment. Someone wanted to see us fire up the soldering iron. So I think once we do get the soldering iron fired up, we'll find that people won't doubt that this isn't a green screen. So I don't know. Do you have one there, Matt? Mine is here.
I do actually have a green screen in this room, but it's just sitting down the bottom. It's a little Elgato one.
Actually, I asked me about a soldering iron.
Oh, the soldering iron. I was thinking green screen. I have a baby USB
battery powered one
in the house. I've got a big one. Yeah, I've got a big one in the house. So I'll bring that out when I get myself properly set up. How are we going for time? We've got 1 minute left.
Yeah, we've got a minute left.
I don't think we're going to be able to do it, but what I'll do is I'll fix up these imports and then we'll call it a day and we'll pick this up next time. I reckon maybe 15 minutes at the start next time we can cover this, and then we'll jump onto another topic. Before we wrap up, what would you guys like to see and girls next?
We're at 1 o'clock, so we'll have to drop off the channel. But thanks everybody for coming along. We look forward to it. We'll post up announcements to everybody when our next session is coming on. We'd love to hear some feedbacks, and we appreciate all your support. And thanks everybody, and see you again in the shed in another couple of weeks, Matt.
Yeah, done. Thanks everyone, and yeah, take care. I'll catch you all later.
Bye.